So we're in the Oval Office, we're sitting in front of the president, and I'm explaining what Hezbollah is doing. And the Lebanese ambassador is agreeing with me. And I'm talking about our need to respond to missiles and rockets being fired into northern Israel. As we're sitting there, the door opens, and the head of protocol brings me a yellow slip.
Today is Thursday, April 30th. This is Boundless Insights, and I'm Aviva Klompas. Israel and Lebanon have a history marked by war, uneasy truces, and the persistent threat of Hezbollah along Israel's northern border. But in the post-October 7th landscape, things have been shifting. This week, Israel and Lebanon are expected to enter another round of talks in Washington. There are even murmurs, quiet but notable, about the possibility of a peace agreement between these two countries that have been at war since Israel's founding. Now that said, the reality on the ground remains tenuous. Hezbollah has dismissed the US-mediated ceasefire as meaningless, and the Lebanese government appears unable to confront the terror group, let alone disarm it. So what kind of stability is being negotiated? And is it realistic to talk about peace? To discuss all of this, I'm joined today by the man who has been in the room negotiating on Israel's behalf. Yechiel Leiter is Israel's ambassador to the United States and has held several senior roles across government. He's also a father of 8 and carries a personal loss. His eldest son Moshe was killed fighting in Gaza in November of 2023. Ambassador Leiter brings real insight and personal perspective to this important conversation. Let's get into it. Ambassador, welcome back to Boundless Insights.
Good to be with you, Aviva. It's always good to be boundless.
I agree with you. Well, I want to start by asking you the big and very important question. There are murmurings of a possible peace agreement between Israel and Lebanon, and I'd like to know, is that realistic in any way or simply wishful thinking?
Well, it certainly is wishful thinking. Both sides want a peace agreement. Israel certainly wants a peace agreement with Lebanon. I think the majority of Lebanese want peace with Israel. The problem is that there's a occupation of Lebanon by a Iranian proxy by the name of Hezbollah. Now, as you know, the ethnic breakup, the mosaic of Lebanon is varied. You have Sunni Muslims, you have Shiite Muslims, you have Druze, you have Christians, Maronites. And until recently, the majority of the Shiite Muslims were at least tacitly supportive of Hezbollah. And that has changed. And whereas in the past it was perhaps only 5 or 10% that were opposed, now it's well over 50% of the Shiite Muslims who are opposed to Hezbollah. So that's a sea change in public sentiment within Lebanon. The Sunni and Christian leadership sense this, and therefore they're more willing to go further than they were before in terms of pursuing a peace treaty with Israel. So this is something that I discussed with the president on Thursday at the second round of talks, which actually took place in the Oval Office with the president. Kind of it was a surprise because we were only told to come to the Oval. The president wanted to come in and shake everybody's hand, but in the end he called us all in, and the talks actually took place in front of him. We were kind of lined up in a row of chairs in front of his desk, and he called on each one of us, and we went through the issues together with him. And it was kind of a surprise to everybody in the room that the Lebanese ambassador and myself were on the same side of the issue. You're normally used to negotiating between two opposing sides, but we both agree on the main issue. The main issue is the dismantling of Hezbollah. So if we're actually able to reach a stage where there's an implementation of that dismantlement, I have no doubt there'll be peace. That's the impediment. If we get beyond that impediment, find a mechanism for the destruction of Hezbollah, certainly as a military party in Lebanon, there'll be peace between the two countries.
I want to ask you about these sit-down meetings because you are the man in the room representing Israel in these negotiations. And earlier in the month, I think it was April 14th, you met with the Lebanese ambassador in Washington. Was that the first time there were direct negotiations between the Israeli and Lebanese government?
Well, I think there were some direct talks, perhaps not at that political level, about over 30 years.
So it's been a while.
It's absolutely been a long time. Of course, there was a negotiated agreement, the first Lebanon War in 1983. I don't recall what level that was at. I don't believe it was at an ambassadorial level, probably at the lower military level. But the relationship that we have right now with the representatives of the Lebanese government is a good one. And we're working on a number of confidence-building measures in the interim. we don't talk about them publicly yet and just celebrate them if and when they happen. But again, the Lebanese would certainly like to see Israel withdraw from Lebanon. And we don't have any territorial claims on Lebanon. There's few minor border issues as to where exactly the blue line runs, but those are things we negotiate very quickly. We could sit down, negotiate on a clear delineation of the international border, the sea border, the Mediterranean, water rights, the issue of natural resources and their allocations, issues of embassies, visas, tourism, international investment, the rebuilding of southern Lebanon. All of this stuff can be worked out in 2-3 months. I've no doubt about it. The problem is it just can't be implemented as long as Hezbollah remains a strong Iranian proxy within Lebanon.
You're reminding me of my time when I was the speechwriter for Ambassador Ron Prosor at the United Nations, where one of the very first lessons I got was you can't talk about a border between Israel and Lebanon. You have to talk about the blue line, which is a demarcation line created by the United Nations. Their peacekeepers wear blue helmets, and the demarcation line is a series of blue barrels. I just want people that are listening to understand. So you've already met with the Lebanese ambassador twice this month. You're meeting again this week. I know you won't get into the details, but can you share maybe the objectives of what the talks are for?
Well, first of all, I could use a speechwriter here in Washington, Aviva. If you're free at all, I'd love for you to come down and give me some input here on my speeches.
Do you like corny puns? Because that's really where Ron asked me to specialize. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know rockets shouldn't be falling on your head.
Right.
The classics.
Right. Yeah, well, look, that's our main case. I mean, what we're saying very clearly is we don't have territorial interests in Lebanon. I mean, that's not the issue. The issue is we don't want to have a malign entity on the other side of the border that whenever it feels it's the right time, fires rockets and missiles into our towns and villages. I'll tell you actually an anecdote from last week. This is real, like right out of the oven. So we're in the Oval Office. We're sitting in front of the president, Ambassador Huckabee, myself, Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Rubio, Ambassador Hamadi from Lebanon, Ambassador Issa, the U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon. And I'm explaining what Hezbollah is doing. And the Lebanese ambassador is agreeing with me. And I'm talking about our need to respond to missiles and rockets being fired into northern Israel. As we're sitting there, the door opens, and the head of protocol brings me a yellow slip. I open it up, and inside there's a message from the military attaché, our military attaché here in Washington, that we were just hit in the community of Shtula, right on the blue line, by Hezbollah rockets. And, of course, it's unusual that a slip of paper comes into the Oval Office and it's not for the president. So all eyes were on me. And the president looked up and said, anything? And I said, we just got hit with rockets, as if, it was the perfect timing that came from heaven, just to convey that message. And what we've come to the table with, I think, is a very original, creative idea for pursuing negotiations. Until now, we haven't been able to talk about peace with Lebanon because we've been held hostage by Hezbollah, right? So we're saying until Hezbollah is dismantled, there's nothing we can do. What I've come to the negotiating table with now is a suggestion that we conduct negotiations over peace as if there's no Hezbollah. And we fight Hezbollah as if we haven't achieved peace yet.
I've heard that line before. David Ben-Gurion's famous 1939 declaration, we shall fight the white paper as if there were no war, and we shall fight the war against Hitler as if there were no white paper.
But the idea here is that if we could create a shelf agreement that's all ready to be signed, all the issues have been concluded, the blue line, Mediterranean, everything I mentioned before, the natural resources, exchange of visas and embassies and so on, all that could be ready. Lebanese can hold it out to the Lebanese people and say, look, this is what we can have as long as we get rid of Hezbollah. In other words, it's going to be contingent on the second track. The second track is going to be how Hezbollah is going to be dismantled. So that's an invitation to the Lebanese people to say, enough is enough. We've had it with Hezbollah. Yes, get in there, rid Beirut of their operational presence, and then clean the rest of the country, particularly South Lebanon, from their influence. So I think this is a turn of events that has the potential to do something that was never done before. The problem is, of course, that in the interim, Hezbollah wants to destroy the ceasefire. They're constantly firing these missiles, rockets, and now they have these attack drones, these one-way suicide drones that they're firing into our troops in southern Lebanon, which is a huge problem that we have to deal with. And we have to respond. We respond, of course, forcefully. That could undo the ceasefire potentially, but we're trying to keep focus on both tracks. Conduct those negotiations on the one hand for peace and fight Hezbollah at the same time.
At its core, as you've laid out, the issue is the ability to negotiate stability with a state that can't actually control the terrorist organization operating in its southern territory. And the question I think many people have is it that the Lebanese government is unwilling to do so or it's unable to do so?
Yeah, well, that's the classic question, Aviva. It actually is a little bit of both. Even if they had the will, the question is whether or not they actually have the capability. And what we're suggesting is that we do it incrementally. In other words, somebody, whether it's Israel, the U.S., or some other force, not UNIFIL. We don't want to see the French here. We certainly not the French, but the UNIFIL forces, which have been actually a very negative force in southern Lebanon. They've actually been more of the problem than they have of the solution. But an agency which can train and vet. It's not only important to train special forces within the Lebanese armed forces, but it's important also to vet them, because the problem we have now is that we have Hezbollah sympathizers and sometimes Hezbollah members actually entering the LAF, the official forces of Lebanon.
The Lebanese armed forces.
Lebanese armed forces, exactly. So we need to have these elements weeded out of the system. And when we create special units, we need them to be vetted so that none of these elements come in. Because right now, there is a mechanism that's set up with American oversight, and we very often convey intel to the mechanism, which gets passed on to the Lebanese armed forces, which then gets leaked. So if, for example, we say, look, in the particular village, at a particular house, there's a cache of rockets that are ready to shoot into Israel, we'll often pass that information on, and then we'll see them, in the middle of the night come in, remove the rockets, and then the Lebanese armed forces comes the next day and there's nothing there. But of course, they've been tipped off. So we've been playing this game repeatedly, and that's not the solution. We need units which are completely vetted of Hezbollah elements, and we need to go in an incremental fashion where we'll take the command centers in Beirut, for example. Let's liberate the capital of Lebanon from IRGC. IRGC, of course, is the extension of the Iran, which is leading operationally these Hezbollah forces. We remove them from Beirut. We remove the headquarters of Hezbollah from Beirut. We liberate the capital of the country from IRGC, Iranian and Hezbollah influence. And then we move in stages. They move in stages, particularly in the area of South Lebanon, first and foremost, before we get to the Bekaa Valley in the northeast.
You mentioned the French. After your last round of meetings, a comment that you made about France got a lot of news attention. So a reporter asked you about France's participation in the negotiations, and you responded by saying, I'll quote you, "We certainly don't want the French anywhere near these negotiations. We like to keep the French as far away as possible from pretty much everything, but particularly when it comes to peace negotiations." End quote. First of all, why does France have such an interest in Lebanon?
Well, historically, the French have a footprint in Lebanon because after the Sykes-Picot Agreement between France and England over the Middle East, so Lebanon went in the direction of France, whereas the farther south, what was then called Palestine or ancient Israel and Transjordan went into the English sphere of influence, as did Iraq, for example. So they've always had a footprint in Lebanon, Syria, but it goes beyond that. France is looking for a place in the international order. They have a very large Muslim population, so they want to appear to their constituents as being involved in, solving problems in the Middle East. But because they have a very large Muslim population, they are paying homage to the most extreme elements within that Muslim population. I made that statement. Those talks took place at a time when France did not allow American airplanes carrying resupply weapons to Israel to go through its airspace. As Israel is fighting a war, is the ally of the United States against Iran. France is sitting the whole thing out, part of NATO, which refuses to help participate in this battle against the Iranian menace. And they don't even allow their airspace to be used for the resupplying of Israel. which is fighting a seventh front war now for 2.5 years and is the model ally of the United States, they're a bad influence. And they've got to get their act together. And until they do so, we certainly are not interested in seeing France anywhere near negotiations. Just stay away.
Well, let me ask you about the United States and the war with Iran. There is a perception in Israel that the current ceasefire, which admittedly is not stopping anybody from shooting back and forth, was imposed on Israel by the United States to get a truce with Iran. Can you speak to that?
We don't talk about, impositions. We have a great relationship with the United States. Think about it. I mean, we've been operating in Iran now together, both in planning and operations for months, and it's come off seamlessly. I don't think there's ever been a precedent for this between any two countries. Imagine, I mean, we've flown 200 airplanes, 3 sorties a day, alongside of our American allies. So we're not really talking about impositions. We're talking about working together to iron out problems. The ceasefire in 2024 was brokered by my predecessor, Ron Dermer, Minister of Strategic Affairs. And that ceasefire with Lebanon clearly stated that we have the right, the obligation to respond and eliminate any imminent threats or threats that were becoming imminent. Okay, we didn't have to wait actually to be hit with rockets in order to respond, but if we see them organizing, reconstituting, and that's what we've been doing, for 1.5 years, actually, until Hezbollah decided to join this war with Iran. But when you're dealing with a massive issue as the war in Iran, the issue of Straits of Hormuz, nuclear weapons program, remember, Iran's twice the size of Texas. I mean, it's a huge, huge country. And the border in the Gulf that we're talking about is 1.5 times the size of the entire western coast of the United States. So we're talking about a huge area. And the United States has multiple vectors to deal with making a decision. Lebanon is one of them, the context of those negotiations. And we thought it was important to go back into the mode of the ceasefire of 2024, but not preceding the ceasefire of 2024, which didn't allow us the wherewithal to eliminate imminent threats. So we're back to that position where we are operating against Hezbollah's reconstituting in South Lebanon. So we've moved in, we've created a yellow line. It's important to understand what this yellow line means. It's not an arbitrary border, and we don't plan to stay there for the duration. The yellow line is the line from which anti-tank missiles or shoulder-launched missiles can be fired into our northern communities. And we need to clean that area from Radwan fighters. The Radwan fighters, that's Radwan, they are like the Nukhba fighters that came over on October 7th from Gaza. There are several thousands in number. There are between 12,000 of them. And there were plans to invade northern Israel the same way Hamas forces, the Nukhba forces, invaded us on October 7th. And there are actually dozens of these tunnels that were leading across that blue line we talked about before. So those tunnels, when you see an explosion on television or blowing up a tunnel, those are the tunnels that Hezbollah built over years to be frontline attack tunnels where they send in their special forces and they come out suddenly and take hostages and murder people. This, by the way, anybody who's gone to the 38th parallel dividing South Korea and North Korea can actually go in to what these tunnels look like. And much of this tunnel warfare was actually brought from Asia, from Korea and Vietnam. That's where they learned the art of tunnel warfare.
That's very interesting. I mean, I think Israelis, certainly better than the rest of us, understand the threat that Hezbollah poses to the north. And it's for that reason that 65% of Israelis opposed the ceasefire. And 70% of Israelis believe that it was a concession to the Americans. So what do you say to Israelis that are feeling like, well, the threat is still there, and we should have been able to continue to fight Hezbollah until the threat was properly diminished?
Well, first of all, I think it's probably more than 65% that's opposed. But people have to understand that we are continuing to fight Hezbollah. And if we are able to achieve a shelf agreement for complete peace with Lebanon, that's going to contribute to our ability to fight Hezbollah. So it's not a binary situation. You're either fighting or you're not fighting. We're fighting Hezbollah. We're not going to give up on the fight against Hezbollah. And at the same time, we're taking factors, regional factors, and allied factors. I mean, let's understand, the United States is our senior ally. And we could not have eradicated, obliterated, degraded, whatever you want to call it, the pursuit of nuclear weapons on the part of Iran without our senior partner, without the United States. So we certainly factor in interests of the U.S. in the Middle East, but by no means does that mean that we have stopped the war against Hezbollah.
Ambassador, I want to thank you for coming and sharing with us.
Well, it's good to be with you, Aviva. Thank you so much.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Boundless Insights. Whether you've been with us from the start or are just discovering our show, we're so glad you're here. If today's conversation sparked a question, challenged your thinking, or made you shake your head, I want to hear from you. Email me at podcast@boundlessisrael.org. Your feedback gives us ideas for new topics and new guests. And if you believe these conversations matter, there are 3 ways to support the show. First, hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. Second, help us spread the word. Share an episode with friends and family, post about it, or mention it in a group chat. It really does make a difference. And third, consider supporting our work. Boundless is a nonprofit, and we rely on donors to keep the show going. You can make a gift at boundlessisrael.org/donate. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep the conversation going.